Friends, who here this morning likes to be wrong? Maybe I'll ask that question more pointedly. Who here this morning likes to be told they're wrong? That's even worse, isn't it? It's one thing to know you're wrong, it's another thing to be told you're wrong. We like that even less. I thought I would talk a little bit this morning as I was writing this sermon about how differently husbands and wives handle the concept of being wrong, but I thought for the sake of my own marriage I'd pass on that discussion. But seriously, how do you feel when someone comes up to you and tells you you're wrong about something? We don't like it, do we? Even if in our head we know that we have been wrong, it doesn't feel good when someone comes up and tells you what you have done, what you have said is wrong. Because our reasoning wants to say somewhere in us, maybe I was wrong, but I had a good reason for it. Maybe what I did was wrong, but... And then we come up with a list of reasons about why it was okay what we did. What about when God comes to you? What about when God comes to you in His Word and He points you to His 10 Commandments and He says to you, you're wrong? How do we handle that? When God shows you His 10 Commandments and says, here is my word, here is my will for your life. How does that feel when you know you're wrong? Again, our mind of reasoning gets churning again, doesn't it? Yeah, but I know it was me and maybe I did something wrong, but look at them. What they did was way worse, right? We want to rationalize, we want to justify, we want to make it all somehow okay in our minds. Yeah, I did it, but what about that? What about this? We want to quiet our own conscience and convince ourselves that it was all okay. God comes to us, doesn't He? In a strong and firm way, and He says to you, He says to me, you're wrong. And when God speaks, it would be good for us to listen. Job was convinced that he wasn't wrong. God spoke to Job and said, Job, you're wrong on this one. But Job looked at his life and he said, but God, why would you even bring me into this world just to bring all this tragedy upon me? Why even let me live if this is how my life is going to be? God, I must be right about this one. God, I've been good. God, I've been faithful to you, but now my whole family is gone. My children all dead. God, I've been faithful to you. I've lived my life the way that you would have me live it, God, but now all my friends have turned their backs on me. God, I've been faithful to you, but now my health is failing. God, I've been faithful to you when my wealth is gone too. God, how can I be wrong on this one? Job would go to bed at night thinking, now I'll find relief. I'll find relief in sleep, but nightmares would haunt his dreams. He'd lie awake in the middle of the night. He'd look forward to the morning thinking dawn would bring relief. But it never did. He looked at the crumbles, the rumbles of his life, and he wondered, how could this all have gone so terribly? Why, God, did you even bring me into this world if this is how it was going to end up? God, I don't deserve this. God, you are being cruel. God, you are being unjust. This is not how this is supposed to be. And 3 of his friends said, you're right, Job. God has turned his back on you. If you really were so good, Job, God would be showing you his love in your life, but he's not. You must have done something terribly wrong, Job, to deserve all of this, and his friends turned his back on him. And so he cried, "Why me, God? Why me, God? I don't deserve this. As I lie here in ashes with my wounds festering and weeping, and I cry out to you day by day, but you don't answer. I pray and pray and pray to you, but you give me no call. God, I don't deserve this. Why, God? Why, God?" And then God spoke. And when God speaks, it's time to listen. God said this to Job. "Where were you, Job, when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know, Job. Who stretched out a measuring line across it? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed limits for it and set its doors in place, when I said, 'This far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud ways halt.' Where were you, Job, when I did all of this? Who are you, Job, to bring me to court? Who are you, Job, to make me stand before you and defend myself? Who are you, Job, to speak to me this way? I am God. I am the creator of all that is. I made this, I made that. I put the stars in their courses. I put the earth here in just the right place. I made all of this. Where were you, Job, when I did all of this? Who are you to call me to court?" Who was Job to say those things to God? To call down God and say, "God, answer me, defend yourself, God." And God says, "I don't have to defend myself to anyone. I made the sun, the moon, and the stars. I put the earth and its oceans in their place and said, 'This is where you shall be.' Who are you to call me?" God had a plan in mind, didn't he, with Job? Job felt like God's love had abandoned him. Job felt like, just like his friend, God had turned his back on him, but God had not. God brought Job to his knees, didn't he? And whatever pride was there, whatever self-reliance was there, was now being stripped away. Let's back it up a little bit here. Let's go back to last Sunday. Last Sunday we talked about the power of the gospel, right? We talked about how the power of the gospel is like a seed planted and the wonderful miracle of growth that comes from it, and how that is God's work in us and on our hearts and in our faith. God plants a seed, God waters it, God makes it grow, and it becomes that bloom, that flower, that fruit that he wants it to become. Today we talk about that fruit that God wants us to bear. And the fruit that God wants us to bear in the life of our faith is utter trust and reliance on him, even when all the outward evidence of this world says you have no reason to trust in God. We heard an example of that, didn't we, in our gospel lesson for today? Those disciples were in that boat, and Jesus, of all things, was sleeping in the back of it. And this furious storm rips up on the sea that they're sailing upon, and the disciples feel as if they're going to die. The waves crash and crash and crash against the boat. The disciples say, "We're going to drown." And look at Jesus and say, "Help, what are you doing sleeping right now? We're going to die here." All outward evidence says this is going to be a terrible situation. All outward evidence says you've abandoned us in this moment. Jesus, wake up and do something. Have you ever felt like saying that to Jesus? Wake up and do something. Look at my health here. My health is failing. Wake up and do something. Look at my loved one and what they're dealing with right now. Lord, wake up and do something about this. Lord, look at my family right now. There's strife there, there's pain there, there's anguish right now. Things are being torn apart. Wake up and do something. I pray and I pray and I pray that all this would be okay, but it seems like you don't answer. It seems like you're nowhere to be found. Wake up. Do something. Sometimes we think maybe God isn't there. Sometimes we think that perhaps God has turned his back on us, God has abandoned us. But who are we to call God to court? Who are we to say, answer me, stand before me, and give me a reason for all of this? And God says to us the very same thing he said to Job. Where were you when I made my plan? Where were you when I created all of this? What do you know about anything? But if we want answers, Christians, if we want to know what God has to say about all of this, about us and our problems and our pains and our strife and our anguish and our worries and the wonders of life, we turn to the Word. And there in that Word are the very promises of God. And his promises speak right to that pain. The promises speak right to that anguish, to the trials, to the temptations, to the worries and the wonders of life. The promises are right there to guard and protect it all, to speak right to us when we're down on our knees saying, God, I can't do it anymore. And God says, I have you right where I want you. I stripped away pride. I stripped away self-reliance. I stripped away any sense of, I can do something about this. I have you right where I want you, on your knees, looking to me for help because you know that you can't do it, but I can. And so we go to the Word, and there we hear again and again Jesus saying, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. I am in that boat. I have not abandoned you. I have not walked away. I'm here to say to the winds and to the waves of your life, to those storms that tear you down, quiet. Be still. When we're on our knees, when we look to him, he has us right where he wants us. You can't do it, he says. Don't look to yourself. Your will, your pride, your emotions, they shall fail you. But Christ never will. When you seek an answer, how's that for an answer? Christ never will. In life, on cross, in empty tomb, in his throne in the heights of heaven, he shall never fail you. When you've stripped it all away, when God has stripped it all away, when it's left down just to pleading for God for help, there is Christ standing before you. Now utter reliance is only on him, and now God has you where he wants you. And so we listen when God speaks. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. I have not left you alone, he says. I have not abandoned you. I have not walked away. My love has been there the whole time, guiding and directing and pushing you where I want you to go, so that one day you'll end up in that place where all the strife and the pain and the worry and the wonders are all gone, and I'll have you now right where I want you, that is in the heights of heaven, because God sees the whole picture, doesn't he? We see what's just in front of the eyes, and sometimes that clouds our judgment and clouds our vision, but God sees it all. God knows it all, and so he says to us, just remember, you weren't there when I mapped it all out. You weren't there when I said how this is all going to be. Well, my plan for you is this: to live with me forever. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure that you're there. And so we trust, Christians, in the promises of God. And when God speaks, we will listen. Amen. Congregation will please stand.